Hello and welcome to the next in our Platform Insight interview series. I'm delighted to be joined by Reid, who is Public Policy Lead at CoreWeave. So Nick, welcome. Welcome to Platform UK, which is where we are today, and welcome to our Platform Insight interviews. So Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you've ended up in the data centre ecosystem, and a bit about your role, because this role as a Public Policy Lead within organisations within our industry isn't something that many people will be familiar with.
Yeah, you're right. It is a sort of relatively niche role. So to provide a bit of sort of background about what CoreWeave is and what we do, we are an AI optimized cloud service provider. So we have a full stack software service which we offer to startups, scale-ups, enterprises, AI labs to develop, train, fine-tune and deploy their AI tools. And below that, we have a network of data centers. We're US HQ'd, so we have around 30 data centers in the US. In Europe, we have around 6, but we have an increasing footprint over here. So we are very much a kind of like the epicenter of both like the data center world at the moment and the AI world, which is sort of fairly ubiquitous these days. And I mean, I'm very new to AI. Well, I say I'm new. I joined CoreWeave last January. It feels like it's been about 3 years, to be honest, since then, the sort of pace, both the company moves, but also this sector moves.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I worked in Westminster, so I have a sort of political and policy background. I worked in the House of Parliament. I worked in sort of various policy roles across Westminster, and then since then sort of moved into in-house roles and worked with the likes of, so I worked with Pfizer, obviously a pharmaceutical life science organisation. I then transitioned into sort of the tech industry and worked for Intel, worked for Lenovo, where I sort of cut my teeth in kind of like the hardware world, and then joined CoreWeave, as I said, in January. And ostensibly my role on a day-to-day basis is to basically track, understand, engage with every single bit of policy that comes out and legislation that comes out around AI, digital infrastructure, energy increasingly, and anything that sort of affects our business. And I cover Europe as a whole, so that's focused on the countries where we have current investments, so that's the UK, Spain, Sweden and Norway. But that number is going to grow going forward, so I'm really, in reality, like the key link point between national governments and CoreWeave, and then organisations like the EU, the European Commission and other things like that, as they sort of legislate around this sector.
That sounds like a huge role. I mean, if we'd been having this conversation 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been why is this necessary? But obviously, as things hit the headlines more, as governments across Europe, including the UK, get more involved, have AI strategies, infrastructure strategies, I'd say it was pretty imperative for organisations across the whole ecosystem to be having something similar in place. What does your day-to-day life look like with dealing with that?
Hectic. No one day is the same. It's just a hodgepodge of dealing with initiatives coming out, whether it's Brussels, whether it's London, whether it's Oslo or Stockholm. And it is, as you say, like every country that is in kind of like the AI and data center space has their own national strategy. And then to engage with them is the role I play on behalf of a company like CoreWeave, to make sure that kind of we're in the right places, that we're investing in countries that are taking a sensible and pragmatic approach to sort of building out the data center sector, to building out an AI ecosystem. And so there's a significant, as I said, every government's doing something, so every day is different. Having to go and talk to people, whether it's in Westminster, go to Brussels as they legislate around AI and cloud. It's an incredibly, throw on top of that the speed at which CoreWeave as a company operates. It's an incredible role, and I literally wake up every day not knowing what's going to happen, or at least thinking, or at the very least thinking I know what's going to happen, then something will come along and derail it. So it's it's a fascinating sector to be a part of.
This isn't something that our sector has traditionally had a role within. So your background, having come obviously from Westminster and then through companies like Pfizer, where that public policy side of things for the pharmaceuticals industry has obviously been core to business and business growth for decades. Do you think that having that background and bringing it into this sector is something that is needed across other areas within our ecosystem?
100%. I think as we've spoken about in some of the panels today and things like that, there are various blockers that this sector faces in order to sort of scale up and deploy the kind of infrastructure that we need to. And the only person that can, or people that can solve those challenges are the government. So having people who know how to navigate Westminster, work out who within government is responsible for particular initiatives and how to sort of, make sure that, organisations within this sector are plugged into the right people, engaging with proposals like the AI Growth Zone initiative and taking advantage of what that comes. I think it's an increasingly vital role. It's not just in our sector, it's economy wide. I think there are far too many businesses who don't invest in the kind of thing I do, and they tend to only do so when a problem arises. But a lot of what I do is try to sort of stave off those problems by
well, being aware. I mean, the first stage with any of this is actually being aware of what is coming out.
Exactly. A lot of it is horizon scanning and trying to sort of, to the very best extent you can, with sort of governments which have the tendency to sort of do U-turns every other day, to sort of look around corners and see what's coming, what is going to affect your business, what is going to affect the viability of that business, both positively and negatively, and do what we can to sort of engage in those processes.
So it's been a mad year in terms of policy, government involvement, announcements across Europe, but also for the UK in particular. So what do you see as having been the most notable over the last 12 months, bits that have come out from government that are going to impact, first of all, on CoreWeave, but also on the industry as a whole?
Yeah, there are two obvious ones. There's the AI Action Plan, which was released last January, which basically set out a series of initiatives to try and encourage the deployment and investment in digital infrastructure, and to try and increase levels of adoption and diffusion of AI across the economy. And that had a series of sort of 50 recommendations, it was all put together by a guy called Matt Clifford, who is very much an expert in his field. The government accepted those. It's in the process of rolling those out and sort of making sure that it delivers on those commitments. And there'll be varying views within the sector as to how far the government is along in that process. Second to that, there was a compute roadmap which was set out, I think, in June, which contained another series of commitments by the government, which include investing, I think, up to £1 billion in sort of domestic compute capabilities. Providing sort of greater public sector support for companies in the kind of like novel area of compute and things like that. So the government's been doing a lot. It's just we are at the stage now where there's been a lot of good work and a lot of hard work, but today this has been the easy bit, and now it's onto the delivery, which is ultimately it's up to companies like ours, but it is the government.
And
as well.
That's the bit that I'm not sure if they're, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there may be a little bit of a disconnect with those plans and what we're physically able to implement. Certainly over the timescales that are being spoken about at the minute.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I think some of the they say everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face or something.
I love that.
And it is essentially like there is a difference between plan and reality, and that's some of the things that we've been exploring today. In our sector, like one of the big challenges, in fact, the biggest challenge we face is around energy prices and the cost of doing business in the UK, which is significantly higher than it is elsewhere. And as much as a government can set up positive initiatives around AI and AI adoption, that fundamentally there are structural problems which the UK faces, which you struggle to see a timeline in which they're going to be solved. So yeah, I agree. There is a slight mismatch at the moment between ambition and delivery. And
do you think by companies like CoreWeave and across the industry moving more towards getting more involved, which they haven't done previously, in that public policy piece, do you think that's liable to help bridge that gap so that we get more realistic timeframes, so that these government initiatives come out with all of the knowledge that they needed?
Yes, yeah, 100%. I think the industry engagement as governments who come often from a sort of, or government officials who often come from a kind of like non-expert, non-technical background, who are largely sort of learning as they go, industry being able to engage in those conversations can very much like help steer the ambition in the right place. It's not always going to get to the kind of place that industry will want, and governments do tend to move at slower speeds than businesses would want. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But I would, my personal view is sort of, particularly the UK government, is the collaborative approach that they've taken to working with industry to date has been really good. And I don't think any of us across the sector would say that governments have been shutting doors in our face, and they've been very willing to engage and try and sort of understand our problems, even if they can't always solve them, or if the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, it's not responsible for UK energy policy. It has a say around government, but ultimately it's not, and that is the lead department that we deal with. Ultimately, it's not the one that will deliver cheap energy prices.
And if we were to sit and have this conversation this time next year, what do you think is going to be top of the agenda from your perspective on that policy piece for the UK?
I think it's two things. It's kind of like no more policy, no more strategies. We've done that now. As it's going back to what I was saying earlier, it's about delivery. And so, taking, for example, the AI growth zone that we're involved with in Lanarkshire alongside Data Vita, it's making sure that shovels are in the ground, that the grid connections are coming, that they're looking at kind of like the way that energy is priced, and actually, making 12 months worth of headway down the route to developing that into the 500 megawatt site that it's going to be. So,
because if that doesn't happen, I'm assuming investor confidence and all of
it'll crumble. Yeah, I think because the UK is not operating in a vacuum. There are countries all over Europe, all over the world, who are looking at sort of, if not necessarily identical initiatives to these, similar ones to try and attract investment, and a lot of them have cheaper energy prices, have smoother planning processes, and so infrastructure can be deployed quicker. And as we see, like, the demand for compute that we have is significant and growing, and our ability to deploy infrastructure not in 2030 but in 2026 and 2027 is very real. And we that's our absolute focus. So yeah, I would hope by this time next year, like, we've made some, like, both literally and metaphorically concrete progress towards delivering the AI growth zones in Scotland and where else, the other places they've developed them. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people watching to see whether this actually does bear fruit.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, credibility with organisations and companies, it's something that it goes up the stairs, but it comes down an elevator. So I think there are a lot of eyes on. I think there's a lot of goodwill in the sector to try and work to deploy and deliver these growth zones. But the proof will be in the pudding.
Absolutely. Well, I for one hope that other companies within the sector, certainly those larger operators, take a leaf out of CoreWeave's book and start making sure that public policy piece is built into their overall strategies. Yeah. Nick, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of the conference today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is Nicola Hayes for Platform Insight.